Hi,
Hi.
welcome to the cell phone committee meeting. It is April 13th, Monday. It's 3 o'clock. Why don't we introduce ourselves?
Hi, I'm Jared Dumas. I am a social studies teacher at Gardner Area High School.
Beth Brooker, school social worker at Gardner Area High School.
Laura Rodas, parent.
Angela Hardy, director of curriculum.
Alyssa Tracy, school board member and parent.
Sarah Sims, principal at Gardner Regional Middle School.
Rita Kaiser, second grade teacher at LER.
Look at us, we did a great job with that. Okay, so you have the agenda. You had asked that it and the materials be sent out in advance. I did a great job getting them out to you Friday night.
Thank you.
Wish I got them out to you a week in advance, like I suggested would be a good idea. But I did my best. Super grateful for Sarah Sims for helping pull together with me some policy language and procedural language for us as very much a draft for us to get to go through as a committee. And we're gonna go through that today. So our agenda for today is to review a broad policy and a more specific MSAD11 version of that policy with associated procedures based on the feedback that we've gotten from the surveys and based on the samples we reviewed from other systems. Sort of coming to a middle ground on that. The intended outcomes is to review the aligned policies and associated practices. Oops, I forgot to adjust that a little bit. Cross out from other schools. And refine a draft. Oh, I never changed this apparently. And make a plan to gain and refine a draft. And then we decide today what comes after that. So review the draft, refine the draft. That's our goal for today. So I printed out each copy here below the agenda, underneath the agenda, and attached them for you. However, when someone makes comments and I go to print, the comments don't show up, unfortunately. So I have also up here on the screen so that we can track comments as we make them together and as we add to the ones that people added in earlier. And then we can come to we'll have discussion around it as we go and come to some sort of agreement at the end where we stand on this. Does that sound like a suitable process?
Great.
Great. When I look at the screen, I don't need my glasses. When I look down, I need my glasses. How do you guys do this? Okay. So. The first policy that's before you and underneath your agenda is actually just taken from Maine School Management Association's draft sample policies, which means they have staff who craft a template for a policy and it aligns with its reference points, which is at the bottom. So this one is specifically cross-referenced with student code of conduct and questionings and searches of students. That's the policy I forgot to put.
That was helpful. Yeah.
That's fine. So we might follow. And is kind of like typically applied or used in schools because of situations that schools find themselves in. Like, for example, when students are videotaping other students or staff without permission. That is not allowed in most handbooks and code of conduct. And so that's addressed in this particular policy so that administration knows where we stand as a district and can follow through accordingly. So that's where this draft came from. We may or may not choose to use this particular draft sample with edited language, given that we have another layer that's more specific to MSAD11 and its procedures that you had requested. Or you can have both. You can have this here and the other one referencing it in handbooks and the details fleshed out in the handbooks. We can kind of get to that. So we're going to start with just looking at this sample policy from MSMA with this plan. I added in our district's name to make it ours. I think there might have been a couple spelling errors because I was typing it out quickly, so we'll address those. But when reading, do you need a minute to read through it first?
No,
I didn't know if anyone had a chance. Okay.
Does it make sense to go through it if we, I mean, I
Just
feel
with
like
comments,
the other
right?
one is,
More specific.
was more specific. If others share that, maybe we don't review both, we review the one that we think.
Yeah, I agree with you, because policy is really just sort of the boilerplate, and then the details are in
Right.
the actual, yeah, I'd agree. I read it and it seemed fun. I agree.
Well, I mean, you said we could optionally sort of take both, or we could take just one.
Yeah, so this one, the first one underneath, and Pat, we are going to need your expertise today. There's a couple questions I don't know how to answer. So the first one is the sample template coming from Maine School Management.
Right.
Not really customized to our district and the feedback we received, except kind of what generally is expected around student codes of conduct and such. And so this one is just addressing, although I updated the language because there was things in here like iPods, which I don't think are a thing anymore, and MP3 players, which I'm not sure are a thing anymore. and a couple things like that, Blackberries, and so I was like, I think I'll cut those out. So letter A is just when you have a privately owned device, they're not to be used. But then there is this statement in here, which is what you brought up, Laura, unless authorized for a specific educational, health, or safety purpose, and the question around that was like,
Yeah.
that's broad.
It is.
Well,
Like the person, because it says teacher or
Yeah,
principal,
right.
and our whole thought was if a teacher is authorizing special use, then we are overriding the entire system of not having access. And so there's an assumption that they don't need to process that with the building administrator. And how do we feel about that? So the idea was we wanted consistency, and this may be, the way this is worded may reduce consistency. And then on top of it, having educational, health, or safety purposes, the other sample policy addresses that more specifically. So it's just something that we have as a question. We want to just scan this one, go into the other one, and then come back to see if we even need the bigger one. Just lifting up some of the things people saw. The letter B is really, we don't take cameras or videos, and especially in private spaces. Letter C is if a school deems an appropriate time and place for use, that would be discussed. We discussed that in our last conversation. Having a yellow zone or a green zone, having it just be the cafeteria and not the hallways, having it, that kind of thing. Letter D is if you violate the policy, there's consequences. This is where the question rises, Pat. The last sentence suggests student cell phones and other devices may be subject to search if there's a reasonable suspicion of a violation. And does that fall under policy JIH, questioning and searching of students? How is it that we can do that?
Yes, if there's a policy violation, and we have reasonable suspicion to believe that a student is indeed violating that, building administrators have the right to search. Now, the question is, for something like this, would we want them to have the right to search? I mean, oftentimes it's used for drugs, alcohol, weapons, those are the factors usually that are in play when there is a search.
And explicit photos. Right?
Yes, we can do explicit photos as well, yes. Or if there's a certain harassment elements, things like that, right? And you have building administrators here who have to do searches and you've done them in the past, but they're never done without considerable thought. And it would be kind of a last resort. the request would always be, please hand that over. You know, we certainly do not want to do searches unless it's required.
Right, so just a student having their phone out when they're not supposed to have it out, and maybe they reach a certain ladder of consequences, doesn't necessarily mean we would be searching a device just because they're using it when they shouldn't be using it.
There would have to be, in that regard, there would have to be a specific reason as to why they would be searched.
Well, did we have a checklist on the website too? Do we use that when we do a search? Do we have to fill that out? Is that required? It looks like we haven't looked at it since 2022, so I was just curious, like if that
Well,
would.
and the federal courts have not
Right.
settled this matter.
Correct.
Certainly not at the Supreme Court level. At the district court level, there is some difference between jurisdictions as to what's permissible and what's not. That's for sure not a settled question. And I think about this in the, we are like, if my employer said to me, hey, let me search your cell phone, my personal cell phone, I would be like, no way, you know? And I'm a well-educated person who knows what my rights are. I can't imagine that a child knows that often. And we need to be thinking about protecting their rights. And so there's health and safety stuff all day long. That's great, but that's why we have school resource officers. There's other ways of gathering information. If there's, a claim about sexual harassment, well, where'd you get that from? Do they have documentation, et cetera, et cetera? I think it needs to be a high bar for search of kids, especially since, I would like to think that every teacher is always going to do the right thing. I could also envision a world in which a teacher says, I know you have stuff on your phone, let me see that. And then they blackmail a kid. That could happen. And so it's around protection of people.
Teachers can't search phones, right? No.
Well, but it's not very clearly outlined here.
This references the following
District
policy.
policy.
The district policy on searches of students. There's a
And-
which we should bring up. I'll
Yeah,
pull
that's
up.
what I'm just looking
Yeah,
at.
bring that up and look at that. And certainly, law enforcement, they do not necessarily have the right to go in and search a student. So if we believe that a student has something on them, we have certain rights that law enforcement do not have unless it is an illegal activity, right? If it's something illegal versus just a breach of policy, they cannot search a student. It has to be an illegal aspect, right? Do you guys, and you guys do this all the time, do you want, no, I don't mean that. You do not do it. You don't do it all
If
the
anyone
time.
does it,
I don't
it's
mean
an
that.
administrator.
But what I mean is that this is a responsibility that's charged, that is given to the authority of building administrators. So I know that there are times where you do search, where I do not do searches, okay? So I am not as familiar with the workings of the policy because that's not part of my job responsibility. So that's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you want me to speak to it, but like, for example, if the vape detector goes off, right? Let's give an example. Then there's only been one student in the bathroom in a 30-minute window, right? We're pretty positive it's probably that kiddo,
I
right?
don't have the same issue around search of stuff.
Yeah.
It's search of cell phones.
So I have never had to actually confiscate a cell phone and search it. Usually most of the cell phone stuff is like stuff on TikTok, Instagram, all of that, Snapchat. And usually by the time it hits my radar, the kids already have the screenshots. They've already emailed them to me. They can bring it up on their phone and show it to me. And so by then there's no reason for me to look through anybody else's phone. I think the closest I came one time was some inappropriate pictures that might have been floating around. And we got parents involved to search their own children's phones to look through the spaces for those to ensure if it was right, or law enforcement was involved to guide them through that process.
I
I've
think
never
that's
actually had to
all
confiscate
appropriate.
a phone, yeah. Like I said, usually the majority of what we're dealing with, students, if they come forward, have screenshots of
Stuff.
whatever it is, so.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna keep that highlighted. So because cell phones aren't actually addressed at all in our storage policy. So Let's keep that
In
highlighted
a
and come back
storage
to
or a
that.
search policy?
In this, the search policy that addresses storage.
Okay.
And then letter E is steps, which we have outlined in the other policy as well. And I period confiscation of the device until the end of the period. Or school day. Oh, yeah. Yep, that was a little clerical error. We'll fix that. And so this is a very broad policy that would require procedures outlined in the handbook. So as a result, Sarah did some work at looking at all the other policies we looked at from other systems. And your second page and third page. I just have to find it. Hang on, a lot of drafts open. Make it bigger. Is this draft? I did not put a policy number to it because there is not an established one unless we reference the one we just did.
JICJ.
Yeah, CJ. So this just opened it up just like the other one did. There's a bit of a discrepancy. At some point, the policy discusses pre-K to 12, and then it discusses 6 through 12. This one specifically addresses 6 through 12 here at the top, so that's something we'll need to look at. The purpose, the objectives outlined very clearly, improving academic focus, reducing distractions, and encouraging positive social interaction. Those were features that we found in other policies, like the purpose statements outlined up front. So Sarah put them in like bullet point format and had them set up here for easy readability. It includes the types of devices, cell phones, smartwatches, earbuds and headphones, and personal electronic communication or entertainment devices. And then
Do we feel like that encompasses personal computers?
I don't know. Just personal computers, or entertainment devices.
Well, I know, I'm just thinking of when Sage was sitting here mentioning that some kids that are seniors might have personal computers, but I would assume they'd get permission to use them in class if they're not using a Chromebook, but I don't know how
To get
often.
onto.
I was like, I don't think we have any at the middle school, and
Yeah.
because they have the Chromebook, they don't,
I don't know, is
they
that
don't
a
even
thing?
bother.
We do have them in the high school.
Yeah.
Now they're on the guest network. so we
Okay,
would have to
that's
shut the
right.
Guest network down.
Okay. So I don't know if that pertains or not, right? Like, is that like a need if do they have to ask to use it, just like their other
If the
laptop?
guest network is down, they would have to.
Okay,
now
Right,
the guest
right.
Network's open.
yep,
Highlight them.
yeah, good call. That's one of those like.
Is that something that can be done for certain hours, or is that something that you have to like, is that a pain?
Whether on timer or not.
We'll call the vendor.
So
to do
every
that.
time a student comes to school with their own device rather than the school issued device, and they want to use it routinely because maybe they want to get comfortable with it before they go off to college, or they just like it better than the Chromebook because they like Macs better and they bought their own, they're always on the guest network. And then are the same filters in the guest network that are on the
Yeah, it just goes slower. We've got it pushed down a little bit. But don't forget that if a kid has a cell phone with a hotspot on it,
Yep, that's
It
right.
doesn't matter.
They
Yeah.
can use that all day long, yeah.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, I mean, that's like. Okay, well, let's take this one step at a time. We could go down a rabbit hole.
Yeah,
there.
totally.
Policy guidelines. So we in here talked about, do we want a full ban or not? And after reading the feedback from all parties, staff would like a full ban and the other parties would like some compromise. So we had come to this idea that these devices would not be used during instructional periods. But there's this clause here, unless explicitly authorized by a teacher for academic purposes.
Can I share an example from
Yes.
the middle school? So out behind the middle school, we have a whole bunch of different trails. And a lot of our science teachers go out there, we've got a marshland, we've got a whole bunch of things, and sometimes they go out there as part of one of their units of study. And they do a nature walk, they're looking for specific types of fungal on the trees and this stuff, right? And because your Chromebook is not gonna work out on the trails, they usually send home a letter to parents saying, hey, we're gonna be using cell phones for this thing. There is an app we recommend if you are interested in your child having it, but they can use it on their Chromebook when they get back, but they may use their phone to take pictures during this time.
Cause it's like an ID tool. It's like
Correct.
it needs the internet to ID the leaf or the fungus or whatever it is.
So like that's an example of where they might want to use a cell phone for an academic thing because they're not in the building where they can use the Chromebook readily to the internet. It would be out there.
So another example I have, I was speaking with some of our wellness teachers and, at high school, we have the wellness class, the gym class, and the goal is to teach like lifetime fitness to get kids to like it. And so I was talking with them about like, how much do you allow like phone use or like the watch use, because this can track exercise and all of those things, which really could help connect them with, being more active in the future. And they said that is something that they use pretty routinely, like when they're doing group activities, that no, they do want the phones away, but when they're in the fitness center and giving them time to like work on their cardio or, whatever there, that just like most people, they really enjoy listening to their own music and that's, a thing. So that would be something that the wellness class would like to be able to continue to access.
Okay. Let's go through and highlight the hotspots and come back. So those are two very good examples of why we would allow it. Storage procedures. At the start of each class period, students are required to place their cell phones and smartwatches in the designated holding container located in each classroom. We had talked about that being like one of those shoe things. Everyone gets a number, they put it in their number. If you look online, you can see spoof little reels about how kids put in bananas and old calculators and whatever and hide their phone. But under a non-spoof situation, ideally, they just go in, they put their phone there so that they can see it. So they know no one's messing with it. And some teachers have extra cords there if to help charge their devices. So it has a productive storage unit space. And that they are not to move them for going to the bathroom, which is one of our kind of issues, right? Is we take our cell phones to the bathroom to communicate and then we come back to class. So that would be a budget concern for us. We would have to find a way to fund that. So every classroom had storage devices, something just to consider. And it also addresses earbuds and headphones being non-visible unless explicitly permitted for academic use, such as probably like in a IEP or a 504. That's the tool that's used to help them. And devices must remain in the storage area throughout the class period. That's to avoid the bathroom runs with our devices. Any questions or comments about that section?
I think that you need to take into consideration that there are some people who leave the classroom like phys ed. And so you're gonna need a locked cabinet, which we have the old laptop carts, and so that would not be a big deal.
Yeah,
Make a note of that, Jerry.
yeah.
And it says designated holding containers, so it could, yeah, sorry, Pat.
Yeah, they're about $15 a piece with what you were discussing, Angela. Those hanging wall door storage organizers
I'll make a note of that too.
on Amazon.
Where they go outside without their device. To ensure safety. And repurpose. What did you call those things? Computer carts. Alternately. Hanging storage devices. I am on slow mode. Devices are approximately $15 per per unit. Okay. Anything else in that section? All right, permitted usage time. So you see this is at top, we said 6 through 12, and then down here we said pre-K to 5, so we will need to make a decision. But pre-K to 5, right now, our practice is that they don't have them out at all, right? They stay in their back, if they have them, they stay in their backpack for the day.
Right.
And that's what this statement says. It mirrors that. And then 6 through 12 may use personal electronics devices during the following non-instructional times. So I wasn't sure where we landed on hallway transitions, but between classes, it is suggested, or lunch periods is what's in this. No comment?
I think both. I think that's kind of a compromise of a quick check-in with their parents. You know, if that was a big argument from both parents and students, was we can't reach each other, I can't wait till the end of the day, and parents saying, well, sport was changed and I didn't know until last minute.
And part of our conversation was teaching them responsibility, right? That is an appropriate time to check your phone in between classes, and then you're going to give, let's say, 5 minutes max between, right?
Right.
And then you're in and they're back in their storage.
Prohibited usage during class periods, except as noted for academic or medical purposes. Medical was mostly like, when we talked about this before, it's like if a student has diabetes and they're a little older and their device is popping off and it shows up on their electronic tool. Like it does for the nurse and the parent and everyone else connected.
And that's referenced farther
And you
down
have a
too.
section just on medical.
Okay,
Can we go back to the permitted usage times? So
Yes.
the zone thing that had been talked about, I love. It seems like we could say, instead of saying 6th to 12th grade students may use personal electronic devices during the following non-instructional times. We could flip it and say, students may use personal electronic devices during the following approved times or whatnot. And it could be the hallway transitions, lunch periods, and then speaking to like the gym or whatever, green zone areas, whatever, but could tailor the language a little bit so that it could help address some of the larger interests when it comes to fitness or whatever.
I need to take this.
Yep. I feel like we need to introduce the zone language at some point earlier, but like, or even just up above. But for now, let's put something in there. Green zones, designated green zones.
And I do think the hallway would be good to identify as a yellow zone, just there's so much happening in the hallways, I don't think that should just be a free for all.
I like that.
I'm actually gonna move this up. What if we said like designated green zones, which are our pre-approved instructional,
Isn't this what we already have?
No,
it's not clear and effective, that's the issue.
we have,
Inconsistent.
the middle school is the same policy as elementary. And it's not working.
Pre-approved academic spaces labeled as such. E.g. Fitness center. I will just say high school fitness center, because I don't know how the middle school, this is just example.
Yeah.
Outdoor classroom, whatever, yeah.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure the high school science that goes outside, they use their phones to do the same.
Yeah, they
kind of
do,
thing.
right.
And what about like library?
Do we want those to be, I don't know, I guess I'm just, if the outdoor classroom, that science teacher speaks to a student about using their phone when they're not supposed to be out there, they can just say, well, it's a green zone, I can just use it whenever I want. You know
So
what
I
mean?
think let's add some language to that.
I was gonna say, I can
We're
find the
opening it up.
specific, I can hunt for the signs that we use to Jefferson, Houston that like have the language. I will say that there were very there was pretty much yellow and red zones. Right? It says green, but really most of them were yellow and red because just because we allowed me to use a phone didn't mean we allowed phone conversation. You know what I mean? Which is really that yellow. You're allowed to use it, but you're not to be listening to things out loud or being in a phone call and those things. So it was very, very few spaces.
So even those would be yellow zones then, right? Because they can't make phone calls, they can't be listening to music out loud, so even that wouldn't be green zone.
Right. We had the green zone, we actually had a specific space identified, like if a student says, hey, can I step out and call my mom? Where they weren't just in the hallway, it was like, yep, you can go over to the green zone. So we had green zones identified and
Wow.
spaces just for that.
So these are considered yellow zones.
And I could see maybe like
Use
before
with
school or
caution.
after school.
Right.
Use with care. So then you could say here, instead, pre-approved academic spaces.
Right, then like restrooms were red zones, right? And there's no cell phones in here, locker rooms, no cell phones.
Do we want the high school library in there? Because I thought we didn't want them using their phones during study halls.
That's different. Study halls are not usually in the library. So library is like a privileged zone. I don't know. We'd have to ask the high school staff.
I know
Well,
my daughter
I think-
signs up and spends her study hall in the
And
library.
I would worry, unless we start getting really specific between the buildings, like we have library classes for our 6th and 7th graders, but then we also have open library time. So like we would have to have different signs that might get a little confusing.
So currently with the library in the high school, students who have open campus or honors privileges can go and spend their time there. And students who are assigned to a study hall can sign out to go to the library. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they are passing all of their classes unless we want to now make that a policy where they have to be passing classes to go to the library. That would be a whole different conversation though.
I missed some of what you were saying, Beth. I got most of it, but I don't need to make a decision about the library. I think we need to bring that back to the administrative team to
Right.
discuss. I can take it out for now and we can ask them what they want.
I think that it's good to keep it as a yellow. We were talking about that being the yellow space, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. And our librarian Katie has actually set up cell phone free zones within the library. So she has like a few tables that have a sign that says cell phone free.
so we could add a little red zone next to it. Okay. So switching this to,
So I have a library question.
Yeah.
Sorry. So then are we changing study hall too? So that study halls are yellow zones? Cause
no,
I thought like we wanted them, so like if my daughter signs up to go to the library, I want her studying, not on her phone. But if we make it a yellow zone, then she could use her study hall to play on her phone instead of, you know what I mean? Like that's where we get
Yeah, so
into that.
it's a challenge because library is actually, it's actually like a central media center. It's not really, it isn't meant to be a guided study, an overseen study hall. It's meant to be a space for kids they're often studying or conversing or planning a project or coloring for a de-stressor.
Yeah.
I wonder, because I feel like we're getting a little bit in the weeds of some of the administration of the
Yeah.
building. I wonder if some of it is we can explain what the different colors mean. And then put in a
Let
note
them
that
decide it
says,
in their
refer
procedures.
to the middle school and high school handbook for the specific zones. Do you know what I mean? Like locations.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because what I may see for my libraries might look different for, you know what I mean? I just wonder if that makes more sense as a policy and then the buildings can interpret.
With the handbook.
Because what might work this year, in
Might not
2
work
years might
next
look a
year.
little different, and then we're
Yeah.
in a space. So I just wonder if that's a more appropriate
How about
policy
that?
boundary.
Does that refer to the building's handbook for the specifically approved locations?
So they'll read them now.
Well, I mean, that hopefully.
We have everybody sign ours,
yellow
no,
zone.
they say that you read them.
Colon, explain the yellow zone. Red zone, colon, explain the
Right,
red
and we can
zone.
explain what those mean and then refer to.
But I think we don't have to wordsmith it
right now.
in this
I can go
moment.
back in and do that, Angela.
Okay, so I'm just gonna
Those
do
zones.
this and and have you go back here
Yes.
and add the colors.
Yeah, because I don't think that we can ask the librarians to differentiate between who's there on honors privileges and who's there on study hall and then police their cell phone
And then
use.
do all that.
That's what I'm
That-
worried about. It's
Right,
like, it's gonna
that's,
be this,
that's
like,
way too much.
let me see your
Can you
power
imagine?
school, where,
Right.
Okay,
You
That's the
imagine
whole
being
thing.
real
so
estate
Sarah will
agent.
edit this section to be
On it.
reflective of the zones so that buildings can then specify those zones themselves. Okay, great, except for pre-K to 5, that's everyone,
Well, and-
red zone.
And red zone, it's consistent across the board around locker rooms and bathrooms.
Correct,
And so
right,
we
there's
wanna
certain
call that
things
out
that make sense,
specifically.
yeah.
Does that make sense? You got that?
Yep.
Okay. Look at us. Prohibited usage areas and behaviors, that would be our red zone, right? So this would be adjusted slightly, class periods, restrooms, assemblies, drills. Like fire drills, they should not have their phones out, they should be getting out of the building safely and not texting
Correct.
as they're doing so.
What about lockdowns? You're not putting those on there. That's what parents were talking about in their survey results, right? I mean, I guess that's one of those.
That is
Getting-
addressed in here somewhere.
Okay.
Let's hold that for a
Yeah,
second.
yeah, yep.
I mean, I think if you're in the, yeah, well. we'll
Yeah,
get
we
to
can
that.
get to it. Yep.
So then this is specific to actions prohibited. Any questions about those? This would be in red or yellow zones, so that might have to be
I can choose out-
reorganized
yeah,
to get
like I
them
said,
all to
I'll
line
go back
up.
through and choose out a layer.
Okay, so then, oops, before we move on, is there any question about otherwise, the stuff that's on here? Okay,
It feels a little weird that if they're allowed to use the phone, no making or receiving phone calls, so we're just saying you can message.
Right.
a lot of the spaces where they're not going to have this. They're outside, they can call, I mean,
I worry about the manageability of that as well. So if we're going to let them listen to music with earbuds on, we're not gonna control whether they're having a conversation with someone.
what do they do now? People in the classroom. Are kids calling in the classroom? Are they
They
calling in
FaceTime.
study hall? Most of the
They're
kids don't.
Most
FaceTiming
kids aren't
through the
calling.
halls.
Yeah, most kids aren't calling
Most kids
each
aren't
other
calling
anyway.
anyway, they don't
No,
wanna call
it-
people.
It's never a phone call. If they are doing any type of call, it's FaceTime.
Well, and that's like I said, I'm thinking back to a specific incident I had like maybe a year ago where a student was super mad at a teacher and got her cell phone out to FaceTime her friend somewhere else, and they're running down the hall and saying all kinds of things, and her friend's saying some really inappropriate things, and so it's like, yeah, you shouldn't be on FaceTime or any calls between classes. Text and check in, but
It does come down to manageability. I agree. Cause it's like being in the library. Are you really gonna go around and check every kid? If you see earbuds in, are you really gonna, oh, what is that? Let me hear.
well, and again, I
Yeah.
think you guys have 5 minutes between classes. We don't even, literally, our kids transition in about 60 seconds. We have like 1 minute transitions.
So,
So it's like,
They don't even
we wouldn't
have
have nearly as much of that as you all might at the high school.
Jared, what do you, I mean, you used to manage that.
So I think broadly speaking, it is really important to put all of this through a lens of manageability, right? Like enforceability. I think there's a fine line, because I think there's a lot of valid reasons why you would make exceptions to some of these things. I'm thinking through my classroom, I'm thinking about the music. Music's a great example. If kids have some time in class at the high school level and I've given the direct instruction and now they're working on a paper or a project or they're pulling something together and they want to listen to some music while they're working. That's something that I permit now, depending on the situation. But then, when you say we're not going to do these things, one of the things is you're trying to create a distinction between the policy that exists now and the new one, right? And you have to be able to say, what's the difference? And if you're going to say we're not having cell phones in the classrooms are red zones, the topic of music comes up, as much as I'm kind of like, ugh, I don't know how they're gonna feel about it. I want to be able to say, look, I'm sorry, and like, but the policy says we're not listening to music. The policy says that we're not using our electronic devices except for authorized reasons. And unfortunately, that's not an authorized reason. When I see, your notes in here about, needed based on a 504 or a medical 504 or an IEP or something like that, that at least is something that like we can stand on, right? And I'd love to let them listen to music personally. But I also would like a building that is less adrift with phone challenges. So I like the idea of being able to say, like, look, this is the line, and it's not everybody's preference, but this is what we need to do to create the environment we want to create. And I guess my point of sharing that is wanting to be careful of creating too many exceptions. Creating, well, no, red zone means no use. Well, except this thing. And this one thing. And so it would be difficult in some regards, I think, initially to manage. But I think that threshold of authorized by the principal is really important, because as much as I'm not super looking forward to helping kids learn that new expectation, I feel much better about it being able to say, no, look, the policy is really clear and the principal is the one that decides, and the principal has not said this is allowed, so this is not going to happen, and this is how we're going to handle it. Versus the world we kind of live in now, where it is a little bit, it's kind of like, well, I'm already hearing it in my head, well, isn't them being able to focus better, listening to music, isn't that an acceptable academic exception? And it's like,
Do it on your Chromebook, plug your headphones in, it's what we do at middle school.
so,
What about, do you see phone calls that often?
Oh, as far as that goes, if that was your question, I've never seen a kid make a phone call in my classroom.
Yeah.
Like in middle class, be like, oh, hold on 1 second, I've got to make this phone call. I've had kids who want to make phone calls to their parents. And I said, there's ways we handle that. Like I said, well, you can go down to the office. I mean, to be frank with you, I know teachers are going to be the ones that say like, well, why don't you step in the hall for a second? I've got kids in my class in high school. I've asked them, if you need to text your parent, or if you need to respond to a text, can you at least raise your hand and let me know? Like, that's better than having their phone out when they could be lying to my face saying, oh, I gotta, talk to my parent, like trying to build that responsible use, but no one makes phone calls in the middle of the classroom. And if they did,
Well,
I
and
would
this
be
would
like,
be in
what are you doing?
transitions in the hallway and
Sure.
lunch. And like as a parent, like I do still use kids are the only ones I happen to want to
Yeah.
call, but it's easier than going back and forth, because sometimes the texting is like,
Annoying.
yeah, like they
It
don't
goes
answer the
on.
question, or, whatever. And so sometimes it would be nice to have a phone call. And so, I mean, the will of the people, whatever is fine. They could still use a classroom phone, but there's a difference between live streaming videos and having a phone call with your parents for 30 seconds to figure things out. And if the survey results were like, we want to be able to figure plans out, maybe that's something we ought to consider.
Just not during class time.
Yeah, this is just, it's saying.
Yeah, I mean, I also worry about transitions. The hallways are really
Way too
loud. I don't know how anybody would be able to manage a phone call in the middle of
But
500 kids transitioning to.
But if we build off what you're saying, under posting, sharing, or live streaming videos, could you just throw in there no FaceTime? Something like that?
Yeah,
That way, if you still
Video
need to
calls,
speak to
yeah.
your parent, right, you can still call, but it's the video recording, the FaceTime, right? Those types of meetings, virtual meetings that I hear is a bit of an issue.
So we could probably just
Because
change
they're-
that top line to saying, to like, remove that and then just saying no FaceTime in general.
Yeah, I mean, part of the FaceTime issue is you're inadvertently videotaping
Right.
other
Right.
people
Yeah.
or
Correct.
intentionally,
Yeah.
as you're
Correct.
FaceTiming
Right.
yourself, videotaping people behind you.
I think
To another
there are kids who
audience
make phone calls between classes, and I don't think it's so disruptive that it's something that we should outright ban making phone calls. But I agree with the video issue, the FaceTime piece, because you're getting other people in the video.
Okay, we'll get the next draft of this to see where we land. Alternate parent-student communication availability and procedures. This came up because we wanted to make sure, especially based on the survey results, that was very clear in our procedures, ways in which people could communicate. We wanted to be explicit. So this one, and this was also starting to lean into what is the responsibility and right of the student, of the parent, of the staff member, of that. Remember that chart that we saw? So this looks like it's leaning into that a little bit. So this gets to using the main office or the classroom phone, the main office again. And
I would
basically
just
that's it.
say, we probably wanna build into the student initiated contact, some sort of provision saying like, if they wanna use it outside the approved times. Cause then we're reinforcing, hey, they could check it on break or lunch.
Well, I was gonna say, allowing phone calls between transitions, then that would need to be adjusted down here under here, that students could call during their transition breaks or at lunch.
I don't love it during the transition breaks, because when we think about the attention pieces that came up a lot in the literature, I mean, it's about where your head is at, and so if your head is like, I don't know, different classes are different lengths of time, but there's an impact on thinking about, okay, 15 minutes till I can do it, you know, if you are doing that 4 times a day versus once a day. So I don't love the transitions. I would prefer just lunch.
And I kind of prefer transitions over lunch, because at lunch, I don't want them sucked into their phones, I want them to talk to each other.
I'm gonna leave a note there and let's see what we can let's go back to some of the other schools and see what they did. And see if we can come up to a compromise on that. I don't think it's perfect for either one.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
And
half
so
of
I
our
kinda feel
issue
like
is
just
trying
leaving
to,
it both, really.
half our issues about having the phones out at lunch is that then we're choosing to sit on our phone instead of engage with each other in a social, non-structured environment, whereas classrooms are always structured environments. We're trying to get kids to re-engage with each other. And not hide behind a cell phone or utilize that as their primary means of communication, have it become their secondary means of communication. But
I think there's other things that we could do there other than putting it in the policy, you know,
sure.
we could, like in the library, Katie's implemented cell phone free tables, we could start putting up signs at like specific tables in the cafeteria that they're cell phone free. And have people, you know, opt to go there and maybe put like some games or some like, you know, little question cards that they can ask each other, like some sort of activity to help them engage with each other off of their phones and encourage that.
Using some healthy habits,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure, which would be helpful, rather than sticking in policy.
Yeah.
Medical exceptions, I actually made some notes on this one. It has to be part of their documented medical plan. So we did see this on other schools with the exception of Bath. They were very prescriptive about their medical exceptions. Mostly because, and I wrote it in the notes here too. There is opportunity, especially through a 504 plan, to have cell phone access be part of a way to reduce anxiety. And yet all of the research suggests the otherwise, right? All of the research that's out there, plus the ongoing work we've done with Lynn Lyons now for 2 years, is that actually increases anxiety and reduces ability to work through and manage in constructive social situations. So I do worry about I do believe there should be opportunity for a medically diagnosed condition that requires it, and because there are some very legitimate ones that they really need to have it. Technology today and medical devices today are set up that way. But I do. Sarah added a note maybe about it's a team, it's a team decision, but when a parent comes in, you can.
We push back.
I wanna support
mean,
parents, I'm trying to really cause I am a parent and I'm also remembering, I have kids in school, not here, but what does this look like, sound like, feel like on all the perspectives? But one of the perspectives that we are continually struggling with is the accommodations around anxiety are often in opposition to the research about how students improve through anxiety. And I don't want to create a condition where we're allowing all these behaviors to actually make the condition worse. So I don't know how to navigate that with policy language.
so I know that for us, we have those open conversations with our parents at the meetings, right? And we do have sometimes the parents who really want to push for that, and we get it. And what we do is we talk through the language, all those things we know about the amygdala, right? And how we're retraining the brain and we're telling the brain, yep, it is dangerous, therefore that's why you have to have your cell phone. And how instead of doing that, what we do is we identify these things we already have. There's phones in the classroom you can use. Mom could leave a message in the office that we could get to you. So we lean back into the original school communication plans to reinforce the support rather than giving into the cell phone.
And I think, Angela, it would be really helpful if any 504 or IEP that is being created for any mental health diagnosis, anxiety, depression, any of that, that a social worker be involved in that meeting, whether or not the student ends up meeting with the social worker or not, but to have one of our mental health professionals be part of that meeting so they can explain no, we're not gonna put cell phones into the 504 plan because that's actually counterproductive and it doesn't help the anxiety.
Encourage that.
But I also think with this policy, if they're allowed to have them at lunch and between classes, then we're already lessening.
Creating a
Creating
space.
a space for that,
And a safe
rather
space.
than taking it away. So I think it would probably be less of an ask if we already had the space built into it.
Well, and if the real issue around anxiety is the interest or need to connect with a parent or loved one, that already exists with the framework about being able to access the school phones, et cetera. And so
Not a total ban.
it's not,
Correct.
I mean, if that's what the concern is, there is already a remedy around communication. And so there are other pathways to meet the anxiety stressor, e.g. communication, that don't involve a cell phone.
I also worry a little bit, it kind of goes back to my previous question around management or enforcement. That if we have a number of students with 504s who are provided with these accommodations and they're in the classroom and they're allowed to access their phones, then other students aren't going to understand. And the teacher can't say, well, there's, the child has this medical diagnosis and therefore. So I am concerned about the friction that could potentially cause within the classroom. And it would be another layer for teachers to have to address. So if we could minimize that as much as possible, understanding there really are situations in which a student has to, for medical reasons, have their phone. We talked about diabetes, right? And
Yeah.
having to manage those blood sugar levels.
Those are the only
Absolutely.
kiddos that we have in our
Absolutely.
building.
But beyond that, I think we just want to be careful in being too broad.
I agree.
And for like the diabetes kids kind of thing, they still need to not be Snapchatting or,
Right.
whatever, and we should
Right.
make that really clear in there.
Correct.
Right. It's just if they get an alert, because the phone alerts them if they're too high or they're too low.
Right.
And so then they would go to the nurse and address it and manage it
Right.
appropriately that way.
Okay. I appreciate that conversation. Consequences, we said we really wanted to have a clear ladder. The one thing that, I didn't think of this, Sarah, until afterwards, was one of the schools remember how we talked about had parents, students, staff? We didn't really get into that a lot in this one, and I wonder if we wanna play around with that or not, but anyway, here are the consequences outlined. First through fourth offenses that mimic a lot of what we saw in other places. And is there any question or concern around those? And this is really for the 6 through 12 space.
I think we had some discussion about it really should go to the office on the first offense. Like they could retrieve it at the end of the class period, but if you have it happening in 6 classes in a day, right?
Yeah, that was something that came up.
Yeah, we talked about the verbal warnings being too much for teachers to kind of keep track of routinely.
They're not gonna be able to check in with each other. It did come up as a concern. That's right. And then we talked about the storage unit in the office is installed. Cause one of the school practices actually had a picture, a photograph of where the devices are stored when in the office. So that's where all that came to. So do we wanna further discuss that? Like so clearly they could go through 6 periods or 4 periods and every period have it taken and then handed back at the end of the class period.
I think it basically gives them 6 or however many periods they have, that many opportunities to not follow the rules before the office finds out.
I wonder, is there a interim mechanism that could be put in place that would allow the teacher who gave a verbal warning to notify the office that a verbal warning was provided and have it in such a way that the next classroom teacher would see that they've already had a verbal warning? And maybe that's too much, maybe that's too many layers with all that the teachers have to have
It wouldn't
in
take
place. I was
long.
thinking about the hallway pass type of thing, is there a way?
Yeah, and or it could be as low tech as if the students have their phone out and I get my warning, I take the phone for the period, put it on my desk. I can pick up the phone, I can call Diane real quick and I can say, hey, just so you know, I just took so and so's phone for the period, so that was his first period of the day, there's 4 more classes or whatever, like, just let Mr. Strout know or let whoever the grade level administrator is, that period 1, so, something like, it could be as simple as that, and I know that's maybe hard to document, but in the moment you could do that, you could also we could write it up as a referral, at the high school level.
So that's what we do, we put ours in
Power
Power School, and of course, we as administrators get an email immediately, and so if and teachers can see the entire discipline log, so they can see if somebody else put one in.
Yeah,
And then we also get to see the pattern, so usually if we
Right.
see a pattern quickly, we usually step in, so.
I just worry if you have that happening as you describe it, think of all of the office visits that the administration is going to have to deal with one day.
Or phone
But-
calls
but
to our
it would go to
office staff,
second
I'm like,
offense
they
and then
can't
they
handle
lose
that
it.
either.
Well, and I think I think no matter how we set up the policy, there's going to be an extinction burst, right? Like it's gonna take time. And then I do think that if we're consistently following through, I don't think there'll be that many office visits, cause they'll know that that's what's gonna happen, and so they won't push it as much. And if we really wanted to do some sort of verbal warning, maybe what we can do is ask teachers to like kind of start class off with a verbal warning to the whole class, like, remember, we're not using our cell phones, they all need to go away, make sure they're out. That is their verbal warning.
A lot of the discipline logs that I see, it's because teachers ask for the cell phones and a kid refuses to get the cell phone.
I mean, I think if we set expectations, they don't follow it on the first time, it's a consequences and they have to walk down to the office and they don't have it for the rest of the period or whatever, but it's not a huge deal, but I think it's a much. Like you said, there will be a drop off pretty quickly if it's consistent and people know what to expect. And that it's being taken seriously.
Kids are definitely gonna test it.
Yeah, Coney did if they see it, they suspend you. They suspended kids they've never suspended for, but it lasted 1 week and all the phones went away. I'm not saying we do that, that's pretty extreme, or I shouldn't have even named the school, I'm sorry, another school.
Can you bleep that out?
I mean,
Whose name rhymes with
I-
I'm sorry.
I don't know, I guess I'm seeing both sides of it. I think having them go immediately to the office helps support even substitutes.
Mhm.
Worry about them being supported in this policy because they won't have access to any of those things and that's
Right.
the more nuances we add, the more difficult it is for them and it's hard enough to keep subs and we want them to keep coming back.
This will be right in the very front of our substitute binder in every single class.
And the flip side will be, I mean, if you try to take a cell phone from a high schooler and they say no, now if we disrupted everyone's learning for the whole period, what is that gonna escalate to?
But that's gonna be regardless, that's gonna be the consequence of a firm policy no matter what. I don't think which step of offense has a big impact on that.
Well, I
And I'm thinking of other kind of similar policies that we have, like the hat policy or like dress code policy, for example, like they don't get a verbal warning of like, all right, so you're wearing a belly shirt today, just don't do it tomorrow. No, go put on a shirt, cover yourself up. It's an immediate response to like, you know what the policy is, you know what the rule is, you've broken it, and this is how we're gonna fix it.
How long is our meeting supposed to go to?
4.
Oh,
So, can we actually bring this one to the admin team and get their feedback since they would have to follow
Maybe
through?
on-
Yeah,
The
that's what I
say, right? I
consequence
think that would
events, we
be-
have some
Yep.
feedback here, about where we'd like to shift this. I think we should probably get their input since they will have to follow through with it.
Yeah.
And then the last part was just like monitoring, implementation and review. It seems like we're ready to move into a second draft for our next meeting. Is there something you want
Could
to
I
add?
add somewhere in here? I think somewhere in here, the policy should state that this policy must be in the student handbook.
It does,
It does
right
at the
here in that
bottom.
last section.
We just didn't go over it.
The policy will be added to the 6th to 12th grade handbooks.
Oh, sorry, thank you.
And we can write
And I read
student
through this too,
handbook.
and I didn't see it.
Information, I tried to find on the website today, this year's handbook. It's not easy to find. I wasn't able to find it. I could only find last year's.
For which school?
Any of them. I used the search feature.
Yeah, that
Oh,
doesn't
the
work.
The search feature does not work at all.
It's all under the black bar under the school, but it is navigation of our websites
It's
is
not
something of
good.
concern.
On the app, you can find it with the search, but on the website, you have to go to like documents and then look for the handbook.
I looked in there and couldn't find it.
So just
In
because
our
we're
handbook,
here,
we
I'm
always
gonna do
have
it.
parents and students sign it that they have
So-
gone through and reviewed. That makes a big
Which
difference.
Which building?
High
'Cause
school or middle school?
came right up
All
for me
three.
for high
Okay,
school.
let's do the high school first. High school,
So,
Just try
yeah,
the
go to
search
the
bar.
school.
well, I'll do the search bar second, because I've had to find the handbook lately, right here, GAHS student handbook, right below the program of studies. Under the
Okay, I missed it
explore,
there.
so you have to go to the explore button for that. Now, let's just try this. Cause I've never, student
do that.
The search just. comes.
and it goes across apparently the entire district.
does,
Yeah,
So,
And you can't sort by date and
yeah,
everything was
Can you
old.
type 2024, 2025 handbook?
I don't know, let's try it. No. So the search feature is not great.
No, that's not good.
And then let's just go here, I agree, it's hard to navigate, I've been going on other school districts' websites looking for certain things too, and every district sets it up slightly differently, so it's like learning how to navigate the system. All right, so the middle school is right here,
While you do that,
Same
I'm just gonna
section.
do it on the app, cause I always do it both
under
ways.
student parent resources. Yeah, I don't use the app so as often.
Yeah.
Sushi.
So our next step will be a second draft. We'll consult with the administrative team on consequences. And we'll bring the second draft here for review to see how it feels, if it feels closer to what we're looking for, and if we're getting to a place where we can make a recommendation. Sound good? Our next meeting date is, yes, we have it.
Yep.
I don't really want to put it all up on the screen because my calendar's insane.
Yeah, exactly.
May 12th.
Thank you. Yes, May 12th, 3 to 4 p.m.
Oh, I don't have that one. Look at me being, thinking I'm done today.
Okay, so one last thing then.
Oh, got it.
So this policy, think about this. So the policy, if it's not approved by us until May, then it has to go to the board in June.
Right,
The board does not meet in July.
right.
And there are usually 2 reads. You'll have to ask the board to forego a second read and have the board approve it in August, so it can be put in student handbooks.
We just try and have another meeting sooner.
So the next board meeting, policy doesn't have another meeting, right?
It does not, it's not scheduled to have another one now. Can they if something comes up? Yes. But its next meeting is May 1st. So
Excuse me.
I don't know that we can make a May 1st deadline, given that next week is vacation. I'm not sure administrators. When is the next administrative team meeting?
First.
We
This
have
Thursday.
This Thursday,
We could
and
fit
then
it
the
in.
Thursday we return.
I just worry that if we're asking the school board to forego a second reading, it feels less like full process.
Does
a lot
anyone
of
here
policy people in
have
markets.
available, I can't believe I'm saying this out loud, because Pat, I know you do not. Does anyone here have available from 3 to 4 p.m. on the Monday we return?
Yeah.
Oh, the
April
28th.
28th.
I know I have a drama meeting that night, but
If we're
please
able to
hold.
address this with the admin team on Thursday, edit
I could do that.
a draft,
Yeah,
look
I
at
just
it.
have to be out of here. I may have to leave a
On
little
time.
early because my kids have a. Wait, nope, oh, that was the one that they sent out wrong. Ah, I'm free, but that's not a concert. I thought it was
So
I
we
was like, no,
could-
my kids have a concert, but
Yeah,
that's the next
that'll
one.
work.
We could meet
Yep.
instead of May 12th, or let's not touch that meeting
Why
date
don't we just
yet.
leave that until we see?
We could meet on the 28th from 3 to 4. We'll review this with the admin team this Thursday. Where we will have Pat's engagement, and then meet from 3 to 4.
That's a
and then-
standing meeting you already have, you mean?
Yeah.
With the admin, okay, yeah.
And then Pat, would we request with Tony, the chair of the policy, if they'd be willing to have a shorter policy meeting
I
before
would
the
need
board
to
meeting?
speak with him about that. If the meeting is on the 28th, then there has to be kind of a guarantee that you're going to have a draft ready that I can send out first thing in the morning the next day. Because the policy packet, which should include the agenda and the policy, would have to go out Thursday of April vacation week because Martha's not working on Friday. So she can send out an agenda, but people will say, well, where's the policy? So it'd have to be ready.
But I mean, it's our second draft of our policy. Do we think it won't be ready?
I feel like we
I mean,
can,
I feel like it would be ready. I
Because
mean,
then it needs to go through the usual channels, to your point, go
Which
through
the
the policy
Policy
committee.
committee's very
Yeah.
thorough. They're,
Yeah.
You know, they look
So I
at
think
things
that's
closely.
appropriate.
It's close enough now and it will be close enough by then. I think it's really important that it be approved through the full process before a school year starts.
I agree.
So if-
I agree. I think it needs to be in place prior to the school start.
Yeah, to try and implement it
Yeah.
after school starts will be a
And
disaster.
Right,
even
it's not
just the
gonna happen.
storage devices, if we're waiting until it's approved to order them, they won't be here to start the year.
Right.
Yeah. Which we would have to do some work at the admin team.
Perfected to death, but I think there's gonna be room for the principals to kind of like find the procedure for the building within the policy anyway, but getting the policy in place is important.
Let's meet on April 28th from 3 to 4. We'll have a second draft ready for you after we talk with the admin team on Thursday of this week. And contingent on policy committee being able to meet on May 1st. If they can't, we'll let you know. Okay. Thank you for staying. We were talking, I didn't, so many of my meetings are going till 5 that I just didn't even think about it until I looked at the clock and was like, wait a minute, this
We
is a
were all in
shorter
it to
meeting.
win it.
We were.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
And
And-
thank you both for all of the work that you've done behind the scenes. I know it's taken a lot to prepare these draft policies, and I really appreciate the thoughts that you put into it, the research to bring these to us.
So Terry, on the app, all the handbooks come up, except for on the high school. Like when you do the explore thing on the app, it's the only one.